The disguise. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, humming like tired insects trapped in glass. The back hallways of Grand Market number 12 looked nothing like the polished aisles up front where customers strolled with carts full of groceries. Back here the walls were gray, the floor cracked, and the air smelled faintly of cardboard, coffee stains, and cleaning supplies. Boxes of canned goods leaned against one another, as if even they were exhausted from long hours on the shelf. Among this forgotten space walked a man in a gray utility shirt. His name tag read Mike, and a clipboard rested under one arm. To anyone passing, he was just another maintenance worker, maybe new, maybe invisible. Nobody noticed him much. But Mike wasn't really Mike. His real name was Liam Reeves. He was the CEO of one of the largest supermarket chains in the country. Billion-dollar revenues, hundreds of branches, thousands of employees. Yet here he was dressed like a maintenance worker walking through the hidden veins of his own company. It wasn't a stunt. It wasn't for cameras. Nobody knew. He didn't want them to. Liam had started this secret journey a month ago. 11 stores already visited. 11 different worlds behind the smiling customer service and clean displays. What he found both impressed him and worried him. Hardworking people, yes, but also tired eyes, unfair managers, broken systems no executive meeting ever mentioned. This, he thought, was the truth of a company. How the lowest paid workers lived, how they struggled, how they endured. And so, on a quiet Monday morning, Liam began his 12th stop. Store number 12, a mid-sized branch in a working-class neighborhood. At first, it looked like the others. The early shift clocked in, carts rattled, produce was sprayed with mist. Nothing unusual. Until he noticed her. Her name was Sophia Turner, though Liam didn't know that while to him, she was just a cashier at Register 4, a young woman in a neatly pressed uniform, hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked like many employees he had seen, tired but professional, polite with customers, quick with the scanner. But there was something different. Most workers rushed to the break room the moment their lunch break began. Food was their escape, their pause in the middle of endless standing, smiling, and dealing with impatient shoppers. But Sophia, Liam watched her closely. Twice that day when her break came, she didn't head toward the vending machines or the staff fridge. Instead, she quietly walked toward the far corner of the store, near the stockroom, carrying a small bag clutched tightly against her chest. When she returned 20 minutes later, she hadn't eaten. At first, Liam thought little of it. Maybe she just wasn't hungry. Maybe she was dieting. Maybe she wanted privacy. But then he noticed the faintest detail. Her hands shook a little as she resumed scanning items, her face pale as if the day had already drained everything from her. It wasn't normal, and it bothered him. That night, back in the tiny motel room where he stayed during undercover visits, Liam couldn't shake the image. He had notebooks filled with observations, broken air vents, outdated scanners, untrained managers. But now, one page had just 2 words, scribbled with restless ink. Cashier. Skipping lunch. Why? The question echoed in him. He was a man used to numbers, reports, graphs. But this wasn't a statistic. This was human. The next day he returned. Same disguise, same clipboard. He positioned himself near the stockroom during lunch hour. Sure enough, at exactly 12:15, Sophia slipped away again. She carried her small bag, head lowered, eyes tired. And this time, Liam followed. The stockroom was dim, stacked high with boxes of cereal, paper towels, and bottled water. Workers passed in and out with carts, but Sophia moved deeper, toward a forgotten storage nook near the cleaning supplies. The secret uncovered. The morning after Liam discovered the hidden carrier and the tiny pink blanket tucked behind the stacks of bottled water, he walked into Grand Market number 12 with a different kind of focus in his eyes, the kind that comes when a person chooses a side and accepts the weight that choice brings. He wore the same gray utility shirt and the same old cap, and he pushed the same rattling cart of tools that he barely used, but inside he felt like he had set a quiet fire. He kept his head down and his ears open, moving through the freezer aisle to fix a squeaky door that nobody had asked him to fix. He had learned long ago that if you want to see people as they truly are, you do not announce yourself. You do simple, ordinary work and let the room forget you. The room always forgets the person holding a wrench. So the room forgot him again. And in that empty space, he watched the way Sophia's eyes kept sliding to the back hallway whenever the clock crept toward her break, the way she double-counted her register before handing it to the floater, the way she smiled at impatient customers even when her hands looked a little unsteady. She had a way of saying thank you for waiting that made even rude people look at their shoes and feel different for a second. That kind of calm doesn't come from a policy manual. It comes from a person who carries something heavy without letting it fall on anyone else. He learned the rhythm of the store the way a conductor learns where the violin sighs and where the drums hide. The produce team moved fastest between 8 and 10, then slowed, then tensed again when the noon rush approached. The deli joked and sang until the line grew long, and then silence fell as knives flashed and paper wrapped in the same steady hands. The front end where Sophia stood was a tide that never stopped. People poured in with coupons and kids in arts with one wheel that screamed. There was a buzzer near register 3 that stuck sometimes. She would nudge it gently with her knuckle to stop it, like she was soothing an anxious bird. The managers rotated on a schedule taped crookedly on the office door. Marlene, front end, Trent, ops, Daisy, night. Liam read the names and watched the faces. Marlene had tired kindness around the eyes and the exact memory of who needed 15 minutes to take their insulin. Trent had the posture of a man who wanted every problem to fit inside a spreadsheet and punished the ones that didn't by pretending they didn't exist. Daisy was a mystery because she came when the store yawned into midnight and left before sunrise, a guardian of hours most people never see. If anyone would notice what Sophia was doing, if anyone would look closely at that far nook by the cleaning supplies, it would be Trent. Liam felt that the way you feel cold air before a door opens. He found reasons to be in the back at noon. A temperature variance on the dairy log, a squeak in the swinging door, tape that needed restocking. He moved with purpose the way he did in executive boardrooms, except here the agenda was human. He passed Diego from receiving, broad-shouldered, gentle, always humming, and asked lightly whether they were still short-staffed at the front. Diego rolled his eyes and said they were always short-staffed everywhere. But yeah, Register 4 was a workhorse and the girl on it never complained. Sophia? Liam asked, testing the name for the first time out loud. Diego nodded and lowered his voice without being asked. That one's made of iron and prayer, he said, half smiling. Walks here most days. Gave up her bus pass this month to make rent. You didn't hear that from me. Liam didn't smile. He let the information settle like a heavy coin in his pocket. Rent. Bus pass. Iron and prayer. It was a language he understood even if he had not spoken it in years. He was not always a billionaire CEO. He had grown up with a father who fixed broken engines in a yard that smelled like oil, and a mother who counted coupons at the kitchen table as if numbers could be convinced with love. He remembered the feeling of pretending not to hear another bill slide under the door. He remembered eating toast for dinner and acting like it was a choice. He had built a life where choices were bigger now, whole company choices, market choices, but something in him still believed the measure of a person was not how they treated the powerful, but how they treated the tired. It was a belief that had taken him far and kept him restless. And now, watching Sophia, he felt the old restlessness turn into resolve. At 12:14, she handed her till to the floater and stepped away with that same small bag hugged to her chest. She did not look right or left. She did not ask permission loudly. She simply moved like a person who had learned that if you draw a small circle around your needs and keep it quiet, maybe the world will let you keep it. Liam waited 3 long breaths and followed. The stockroom swallowed sound the way snow swallows footsteps. Fluorescent light buzzed, fans ticked. He turned the corner near the water pallets and saw her kneeling again, shoulders curved around the carrier, that pink blanket folded like a secret. Today the baby was quieter, wide-eyed, cheeks like tiny apples. Sophia whispered something and the child blinked slowly, content. Liam stayed back, not daring to intrude. He understood enough about dignity to know that kindness can wound if it arrives like a spotlight. He watched her check the bottle temperature with her wrist, watched her kiss her child's forehead, watched her close her eyes for a heartbeat like prayer, and then he made himself leave before she noticed him. He had seen enough to be certain and not enough to steal her privacy. On the way out, he almost ran into Trent. The operations manager had a clipboard and a frown. He smelled faintly of aftershave and permanent marker. "What are you doing back here, Mike?" he asked, eyes narrowing without hostility, just suspicion that had learned a script. Liam held up a roll of industrial tape and said the receiving team had asked for 2 more. Trent grunted and looked past him toward the far aisle. "I'm sick of people using the stockroom to hide from the floor," he said, loud enough for the walls. "If I catch it, write-ups. No exceptions." He spoke like a man who believed systems were only strong if they never bent, and Liam felt a heat rise in his chest that had nothing to do with the warm fans. "Got it," Liam said evenly, and moved on. When he reached the end of the hallway, he stopped and let his breath out slowly. If Trent found the carrier, if the wrong person noticed the tiny socks tucked in that blanket, policy would land on Sophia's back like a falling shelf. He needed to know why she had brought her baby here, how long this had been going on, whether anyone had helped or if everyone had simply looked away because looking too closely makes you responsible. He began to listen with intention, not just to words but to the music between them. In the break room near a vending machine that ate quarters, he heard 2 cashiers talk in low voices about a daycare waitlist that stretched 4 months, about a sitter who had moved without notice, about how formula had become more expensive again, and how sometimes the cheaper brand made babies fussy. He learned that there was a church 3 blocks away that offered free diapers every Thursday noon, which was exactly when Sophia's schedule never allowed her to leave. He learned that the city bus was late 2 days out of 5, and that when it rained, it did not run at all to the corner by the Grossi, right, because the stop flooded. He pretended to fix the microwave but kept the screws in his pocket because the microwave wasn't broken at all. People talk around microwaves, especially when their food rotates under a light and they feel like time is being kind for 1 minute. In those soft spaces, he heard the shape of a life. Single mother. The father left while the baby was still a hope the size of a grain of sugar. A small apartment with a window that faced a brick wall. A manager in the last store who liked to cut hours at the last minute. A new manager here, Marlene, who tried to schedule predictably when she could. A teenager neighbor who usually sat with the baby for 2 hours each day, but her grandmother had fallen and the teenager was now at the hospital most afternoons, so Sophia had been managing. Managing meant bringing her child for 20 quiet minutes and praying nobody heard a cry at the wrong time. On Wednesday, Liam found a chance to stand beside Sophia on the line. He had a fake work order for the misbehaving receipt printer attached to Register 4. He asked calmly if she had noticed jams after noon. She nodded and said it happened when the paper roll was nearly done, and customers always seemed to choose that moment to show 5 coupons on their phone with cracked glass. She smiled when she said it, and the smile wasn't a performance. It was a habit built from thousands of tiny chances to be kind. He asked her name even though he knew it now. Asking is a way of giving a person a moment to name themselves. "Sophia," she said, and he said Mike. And they shook hands like 2 people who might share a small boat in a large sea for a short time. The next customer rolled up with 48 cans of cat food and a story about her cat that lasted the entire transaction. Sophia listened as if the cat were a king. When the customer left, Liam said he respected how patient she was. She shrugged gently. "People bring their whole day to this counter," she said. "My job is to give them a better minute than the one they walked in with." Later that afternoon, he saw a different moment that cut the other way. An older man with heavy boots and a heavier voice complained about a coupon that had expired. He raised his voice. He called the store a scam. He demanded the manager. The line grew. The air tightened. Sophia stayed steady, offered options, apologized for policy without throwing the store under the bus, and called for a supervisor with the same tone she might have used to ask for a price check. Trent arrived, stiff and loud, pointed to the tiny print on the coupon, and told the man, "Rules are rules." It ended fast and ugly. The customer left angry. The other customers rolled their eyes, and Sophia, whose shoulders had remained level the whole time, exhaled when Trent walked away. Liam filed the moment in his head. He had built a company that praised efficiency. Efficiency had just lost a sale, upset 10 people, and strained a worker's heart. He wondered how many spreadsheets had hidden that kind of cost by calling it compliance. That evening, in his motel room that smelled faintly of old curtains and citrus cleaner, Liam opened a notebook and wrote for an hour in a single long paragraph the way his high school English teacher had trained him when he needed to think without bullet points. He wrote about childcare. He wrote about unpredictable schedules. He wrote about how supervisors become gatekeepers when policies forget people. He wrote about the feeling in his chest when he saw a baby bottle next to a stack of paper towels meant for a store shelf. He wrote a question and circled it 3 times. What does leadership look like when nobody is watching? He did not have a full answer, but the shape of it leaned toward action. He could not risk everyone personally. That would be theater. He could fix systems. But before systems, he had to make sure the person in front of him did not sink. On Thursday, just after 11, he found Sophia in the break room with a cup of hot water and a tea bag that had clearly been used before. She dipped the bag gently and looked at the door every few seconds the way you do when your minutes are not yours. He sat down 2 chairs away, not crowding. You live nearby? He asked, as if making small talk. She nodded. 15 minutes if I walk fast, she said. 20 if the stroller wheel catches the sidewalk cracks. She caught herself and went quiet. The word stroller flew into the air like a bird that had escaped a covered cage. He kept his expression calm and kind. You have family around? She shook her head. Just me and Ava. My mom's in another state. She sends prayers and recipes. She smiled, and that smile had a tiny wobble at the edge. Ava? He said, trying her name the way he had tried Sophia's. She nodded. She's almost 4 months. She was early. She likes ceiling fans and the sound of rain. She hates car horns. Sophia sipped the tea like it could be a real meal if you let it sit long enough. Daycare? He asked lightly, as if asking about the weather. She laughed without humor. There's a list, she said. I'm on it. I think the list is longer than my lease. She caught his eyes and then chose trust. My sitter's been at the hospital with her grandma all week. I'm making it work. She did not explain how. He did not make her. He only said, you shouldn't have to choose between feeding your child and feeding yourself. And then he stopped because the line between care and prying is thin. She blinked, and something in her face softened. Thank you, she said. Most people think if you're struggling, you must have done something wrong. He shook his head. Most people forget struggle is a full-time job. That afternoon, the store announced over the crackling PA a surprise walkthrough by the district office for Friday morning. The words arrived like a cold front. People moved faster. Shelves were faced to perfection. The tiny buzzer near register 3 got fixed for real. Trent's voice carried in bursts, checklists, warnings, a promise of write-ups if anyone embarrassed the store. Liam felt his stomach drop. A district walkthrough meant curious eyes in quiet corners. It meant doors opened that usually stayed unopened. It meant policy would march into the stockroom with a flashlight. He pictured the nook by the cleaning supplies and the pink blanket folded like a prayer and felt a protective anger so clean it surprised him. He had not planned to reveal himself this soon. He had wanted to learn more, to watch a little longer, to design a plan that would stand after he left. But the calendar had moved the way calendars do when life is about to test you. He stayed late that night, pretending to repair the wobble on the end cap near the pet aisle, and quietly measured how sound carried from the front to the back. If he stood by the swinging door, he could hear the beep of every scan. If he stood near receiving, he could hear the office door open and close. He traced pathways in his mind so he would know how to move if he had to move fast. Then he waited for a moment when the floor quieted and he took a small step he knew he could not undo. He walked to the far nook, crouched, and left 2 things behind the water pallets where the light didn't quite reach. A new pack of gentle diapers in the right size and a sealed container of formula from a brand the store kept on its highest shelf because it was expensive and rarely promoted. He slid a note under the formula, 5 words printed in block letters so her heart wouldn't race trying to guess the handwriting. For Ava, from a friend. He did not sign it. He did not plan to. Sometimes the kindest help is the kind that does not ask for a thank you. As he stood to leave, he heard soft footsteps and froze. Sophia rounded the corner with her small bag pressed to her side and the look of a person who lives hour to hour and knows every minute by heart. She saw him, blinked, and almost smiled. "Hey, Mike," she whispered. "Sorry. Am I in your way?" He shook his head and stepped aside. "Not at all," he said. "Just finishing up." He moved down the aisle, slow enough to hear the tiny catch in her breath when she found the diapers, the half-laugh she swallowed when she read the note, the way she whispered thank you to the quiet room without a name to aim it at. He let the words reach him like a blessing he didn't deserve, and kept walking. Friday morning landed with the crispness of a starched shirt. The district manager arrived exactly at 9 with a tablet and a smile that never reached his eyes. His name was Victor Hale, and he shook hands like he was still deciding if the person had value. He toured produce and complimented the shine on the apples. He checked the deli thermometer and nodded. He stopped at the front end and reminded Marlene that average transaction time had increased 2 seconds week over week, which is how some people talk when they don't recognize the cost of asking a cashier to be human for 6 more beats. Then he told Trent to tighten the back of house, which is how some people say go look for something to blame. Trent puffed up and marched toward the swinging door. Liam's body moved before his mind did. He slipped away and cut through receiving, intercepting the path he knew Trent would take, and stopped near the very aisle where the pink blanket had guarded its secret. From down the corridor, he heard a small sound. Not a cry, but the prelude to one, a small voice deciding if it needed to call the world for help. He saw Sophia's shadow pause. He saw her shoulders tense. He saw her glance toward the hall where footsteps grew closer and faster and loud. Sure. In that heartbeat, Liam understood that there are moments when leaders draft plans and moments when leaders make choices with no time left to review them. He stepped into the center of the hallway as Trent rounded the corner, lifted the loose end of a heavy shrink-wrap roll, and let it appear to slip from his hands. It hit the floor with a thud big enough to bounce, and the plastic end spun wildly, unraveling like a transparent flag. The noise snapped Trent's attention toward Liam. "Watch it, Mike," Trent snapped, irritated and pleased to find a target. "You just made a mess." Liam nodded, contrite. "My fault," he said, already kneeling to gather the plastic. "The core's cracked. If we use it, it'll keep unraveling." Trent scowled, but he stopped moving toward the nook. He crouched to inspect the roll like a general reviewing a broken weapon. "We can't have hazards back here. Get it cleaned up now," he said, loud enough to be overheard by Victor if Victor happened to be listening. "And tell receiving to log the waste." "Will do," Liam said, keeping his head down and his hands steady while the footsteps of trouble passed by and faded toward the loading dock. When he finally looked up, Sophia was gone, the hallway was empty, and the small sound had stilled. He allowed himself one quiet breath and then finished wrapping the plastic into a neat circle that looked like order. After the walkthrough, Victor called a quick huddle in the front. He said the store was adequate and trending acceptable, which are words that can feel like praise or punishment depending on how much you want to believe them. He reminded everyone that personal items did not belong in the back because liability, and he looked at nobody and everybody at once when he said it. Liam watched Sophia's face from the edge of the crowd. She understood the message. She folded it into herself in stone, odd straighter, the way people do when they decide that today they will not cry. When the crowd broke apart, Liam found her sweeping an invisible crumb from the conveyor belt. "You did well," he said softly. She glanced at him, and the gratitude in her eyes was too large for either of them to acknowledge out loud. "Busy morning," she said. "Feels like 3 days already." He let himself say one more thing. "If you ever need 5 minutes," he told her, "and you don't have them, you tell me. I will find them." She looked at him for a long second, as if weighing whether this was a sentence made of air or wood. "Okay," she said finally and nodded once. "Thank you, Mike." The hours after the district visit ran like a river after rain. Faster, muddier, louder. A pallet jack squealed. A toddler screamed and then laughed and then screamed again. Someone dropped a jar in aisle 9 and the sound shattered the air into 100 sharp pieces. Liam moved with the noise, fixing what he could, faking repairs when he needed a reason to stand watch. He thought about the diapers and the formula and wondered if anonymous help could be a bridge rather than a promise. He thought about policies and how many of them had been written by people who had never had to decide whether to spend their last $10 on milk or bus fare. He thought about what it would take to build a program that treated childcare like a need as essential as a name badge. He wrote phrases in his head the way a carpenter measures twice: predictable scheduling window, emergency care vouchers, partner with local daycare co-ops, payroll deduction scholarships. But the ideas were only wood until he cut and fit them. For now, there was one person in front of him and a simple job: keep her safe long enough to breathe. In the late afternoon, a small crisis found them the way small crises always do, when the floor is most crowded and nobody has time to be gentle. A sudden power dip flickered the lights and made the registers beep in angry chorus. Receipt printers stalled, price checks failed. People started to huff and shift their weight and threatened to leave full carts behind. Marlene moved like a conductor, raising her voice just enough to be heard, assigning lanes, soothing, apologizing while keeping dignity on both sides of the counter. Trent vanished into the office to restart systems, which in some languages means hide where the noise cannot find me. Liam stepped to the front as if pulled by a rope. He stood next to Sophia and whispered quick suggestions. Manual price entries kept the lines moving. SKU lookups could be guessed by pattern when you've touched enough cardboard, and if you tell a waiting customer exactly how long it will take, they will often give you longer. Sophia took the flow and turned it into calm. She thanked people. She cracked a tiny joke about the store wanting to take a break too. She handed a sticker to a child who was chewing the cart handle like an angry beaver, and the child stopped chewing to examine the sticker as if it were a rare stone. 15 minutes later, the registers hummed again. The crisis ended not with a dramatic fix, but with 100 small choices made by tired people who decided to be kind anyway. When the air settled, Sophia leaned back for a second and closed her eyes. "You're good in a storm," Liam said. She opened her eyes and looked at him like she was writing his name in her mind in better ink. "You too," she said. "Most people run." He wanted to ask 100 questions and none at all. He wanted to tell her who he was and why he cared. He wanted to say that she was the reason companies should exist, so that work could be a place where humanity does not get crushed. But he did not say any of that. He said, "Do you have something to eat?" She started to say yes, and then stopped because lies are heavy when you're already carrying too much. "I'm fine," she said instead, which is a sentence that means mong. Nigh things and rarely means fine. He nodded and did not press. 10 minutes later, he left a brown paper bag on the backroom table with a small handwritten note, "Spare sandwich. Please take if you need," and walked away before the ink dried. When he came back, the bag was gone. A tea bag lay on the table like a tiny thank you in a language without verbs. As the day dimmed toward evening and the store's windows pinked with sunset, he saw something that tightened the thread of this story and pulled it across the room. A woman with a tidy uniform and a photographer's memory walked in with a small notepad, this store's mystery shopper, the kind who appears when you least expect and writes invisible grades that can shift a manager's month. She moved like a person who sees everything she wants to see and nothing else. She bought a single item at Register 5, watched the time, counted the steps to the restroom, tested the door to the employee area as if by accident. Then she drifted toward the back hallway, eyes curious, mouth neutral. Liam felt the urge to stand in front of that hallway like a door that would not open. He could not. He watched her pause near the swinging door. He watched her look down at her phone as if checking a note. He watched the way her head tilted when she heard something soft, like the sigh of a bird behind a wall. The store was loud, but some sounds travel on a different frequency. He took 3 easy steps and handed her a loose shelf bracket he had been carrying for an hour. "Excuse me," he said with a humble smile. "Mind if I squeeze through? Need to fix a wobble back there before it becomes a hazard." She looked at the bracket, then at his shirt, then at the hallway, and moved aside. "Of course," she said. He passed, hard a drum, and took the corner fast enough to catch a glimpse of a pink blanket before it settled into stillness. He did not need to do anything else. Not yet. He only needed to occupy space where a boundary could hold. He went home that night, if a motel with a noisy ice machine can be called home, more certain than ever that watching was not enough. If he wanted to deserve the title people used in articles and annual reports, he would have to build something in the shape of mercy and strength and make it policy, not charity. He would have to reveal himself soon in a way that did not make Sophia a spectacle or a lesson for other executives at conferences. He would have to make the story about what a company becomes when it decides that caring for the people who keep the lights on is not optional. He brushed his teeth and thought about daycare partnerships and 90-day emergency stipends and rewriting the schedule software so availability requests were honored by default, not exception. He lay down and stared at the ceiling and remembered how his mother used to whisper, "Tomorrow we try again," on nights when money and hope had both run thin. He whispered it now to no one and everyone. Tomorrow we try again. The next morning began with rain, the kind that turns the parking lot into a mirror and makes every person entering the store shake their umbrella and breathe out fog. Sophia arrived 5 minutes early with damp hair and a smile that did not pretend the weather was kind, but did not ask the weather to be different. Liam saw her glance toward the back with that same quick prayer in her eyes and then square her shoulders and step up to register 4, as if stepping onto a small stage where she knew the lines and the lighting but not the audience. He spent the first hour replacing an exit sign bulb that did not need replacing because it placed him near the hallway he now guarded without orders. Around noon, as if time itself had been waiting, a sharp voice rang from the front, a customer complaint sharpened by embarrassment. "She took forever on her break," someone said loudly. "Please take if you need," and walked away before the ink dried. When he came back, the bag was gone. A tea bag lay on the table like a tiny thank you in a language without verbs. As the day dimmed toward evening and the store's windows pinked with sunset, he saw something that tightened the thread of this story and pulled it across the room. A woman with a tidy uniform and a photographer's memory walked in with a small notepad, this store's mystery shopper, the kind who appears when you least expect and writes invisible grades that can shift a manager's month. She moved like a person who sees everything she wants to see and nothing else. She bought a single item at register 5, watched the time, counted the steps to the restroom, tested the door to the employee area as if by accident. Then she drifted toward the back hallway, eyes curious, mouth neutral. Liam felt the urge to stand in front of that hallway like a door that would not open. He could not. He watched her pause near the swinging door. He watched her look down at her phone as if checking a note. He watched the way her head tilted when she heard something soft, like the sigh of a bird behind a wall. The store was loud, but some sounds travel on a different frequency. He took 3 easy steps and handed her a loose shelf bracket he had been carrying for an hour. "Excuse me," he said with a humble smile. "Mind if I squeeze through? Need to fix a wobble back there before it becomes a hazard." She looked at the bracket, then at his shirt, then at the hallway, and moved aside. "Of course," she said. He passed, hard a drum, and took the corner fast enough to catch a glimpse of a pink blanket before it settled into stillness. He did not need to do anything else. Not yet. He only needed to occupy space where a boundary could hold. He went home that night, if a motel with a noisy ice machine can be called home, but the words had been said, and words like that echo in the wrong ears. Trent's head snapped up. He looked at the schedule. He looked toward the back. He took a step. Liam felt the moment hinge. He reached for his radio and clicked it twice. The store's quiet code for need assistance, potential hazard. He spoke into it calmly. "Receiving to operations, we've got a spill by Bay 3. Slippery. Need a quick sign and a mop before someone falls." It was not a lie. There is always a spill somewhere in a grocery store. Trent stopped, turned, and changed direction without thinking, pulled by the gravity of liability. Liam moved too, fast but not running, and reached the bay a breath before Trent, holding a caution sign he had borrowed an hour earlier because some part of him believed in preparing for storms you cannot see yet. He set the sign down, met Trent's eyes, and held them with an expression that said without saying, "I am useful where you are going." Trent grunted, and for the second time in 2 days, a door closed that had been opening toward disaster. By the time the clock slid past 2, Sophia had made it through another day of impossible choices without asking anyone to clap. Liam felt something settle in him, something like a vow. He could not guarantee he would always be there to drop plastic or place a sign or draw a wandering eye away from a quiet corner. But he could build a world where she would not need him to. He could do that because he was not actually the man with the wrench. He was the man with the pen that could sign budgets and the authority that could rewrite rules. He had planned to wait another week before revealing the truth. A week was a luxury he could no longer afford. He would wait one more day, one more chance to confirm what he already knew and to plan the moment so it lifted rather than exposed. And then he would walk into the morning me, eating without the cap, without the lie, and he would say his name in a voice that carried. He would take whatever came next, not to be dramatic, not to be a hero, but because he had seen a person refuse to eat so her child could. And once you see that, you do not go back to sleep. That evening, as the store lights softened and the rain outside slowed to a hush, he found himself again by the back hallway, not because there was danger now, but because sometimes standing guard is a way of honoring what you love. Sophia passed with the small bag hugged to her side, eyes bright with tiredness and something like hope. She paused when she saw him, and this time she did not pretend she had no need. "Mike," she said, voice low but steady, "thank you for the other day." He could have lied and said he didn't know what she meant. He could have smiled and shrugged. Instead, he met her eyes and said, "You're welcome," because truth, even in a small piece, is still truth. She nodded and moved on, and he listened to the soft hush of a blanket and the even softer rhythm of a baby finding sleep. He closed his eyes for a second and saw a conference room full of executives who would not understand this sound until he made them listen. Then he opened his eyes and walked back to the floor, where a customer needed help finding a brand of tea that reminded her of home, and a teenager needed reminding that heavy boxes break when you stack them wrong, and a manager needed proof that kindness and efficiency could be the same thing if you built them right. He moved through it all with quiet feet and a burning heart, and when he stepped outside at closing and felt the cool air, he knew that tomorrow the disguise would end and the real work would begin. The test of character. The next morning began with the muted hum of the city waking up, trucks growling down wet streets, buses sighing at corners, and people rushing into routines that felt heavier than their bodies could carry. Inside Grand Market number 12, the rhythm started before the doors even opened. Lights flickered to life, bread racks rolled forward, fruit displays were wiped until they shone under the pale ceiling lamps. In the middle of it all, Sophia Turner stepped onto the floor with her uniform freshly washed, but showing the frayed seams of long wear, hair tied neatly back, though wisps still escaped to brush her cheeks. She looked, to the casual eye, like every other cashier, but Liam knew better now. He had seen behind the curtain of her life, and the image never left his thoughts. He walked in too, still disguised as Mike, the quiet maintenance worker who kept to himself, but his mind carried a growing storm. He had made a vow to himself that he would not only watch anymore. He needed to learn who Sophia truly was, not just the part of her visible between customers and coin drawers. He needed to know her struggles, her strengths, and her limits, because understanding her was no longer about filling a report or designing a future program for employees. It was personal now. She had become a living question in his mind. What kind of world did his company create for people like her? And what kind of world could he make instead? The answer depended on how deeply he was willing to listen. The day began smoothly enough. Customers shuffled in with their morning groceries, retirees buying coffee and bread, young parents grabbing snacks for school bags, workers picking up lunch to carry back to offices. Sophia greeted each of them with the same steady voice, the same small smile, the same grace that covered her exhaustion. Liam drifted from aisle to aisle, pretened to repair shelf brackets or check ceiling vents, but always keeping her within his line of sight. He noticed how she handled everything with quiet patience, even when a child dropped a bag of flour and the air burst into a white cloud, even when a woman muttered that she was scanning too slowly, even when a man refused to bag his own items but scowled at her for being too careful. Sophia never snapped, never rolled her eyes, never made anyone feel small. She just kept moving, as if each test of her patience was another weight added to her back, but her spine refused to bend. By noon, the store grew crowded. The district visit was over, but the pressure it left behind lingered like the smell of disinfectant. Trent, the operations manager, carried himself with extra sharpness, barking reminders about efficiency, transaction times, and neatness. He prowled the front end like a hawk, waiting for mistakes. Liam stayed near, pretending to adjust the broken buzzer near register 3 again, but in truth, he was watching the storm build. He didn't have to wait long for it to break. Sophia's break time came, but before she could hand her till to the floater, a sudden rush of customers spilled into her line. She hesitated, glanced toward the back, then stayed at her post. Her baby's schedule didn't matter to the flood of people needing groceries, and she didn't complain. She scanned, smiled, bagged, repeated. By the time the line finally cleared, she was late by 10 minutes. She slipped her till into the drawer, passed it quickly, and rushed toward the back with her small bag. Trent's voice cut through the store like a whip. "Sophia," he barked loud enough for customers to glance up. "Breaks are timed. You were supposed to be off the register 10 minutes ago. Do you think we run this place around your schedule?" His tone wasn't just strict, it was designed to humiliate. Sophia froze. Her knuckles tightened on her bag. She opened her mouth to explain but stopped herself. Any explanation would reveal the truth, and the truth could cost her everything. She lowered her eyes instead, muttered sorry, and turned toward the back. Liam felt his jaw clench. He wanted to step forward to tear off the disguise, to tell Trent exactly what he thought of managers who chose cruelty over understanding. But he forced himself to stay still. Not yet. If he revealed himself now, it would be a dramatic rescue. But rescues vanish like smoke if they don't change the system that created the fire. He needed to wait, to see, to gather enough proof to make a change permanent. So he swallowed his anger and kept his head down, though his fists trembled at his sides. He followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. Sophia disappeared into the stockroom, and minutes later Liam heard the faint sound of a baby's cry, muffled by boxes. He closed his eyes, fighting the storm inside him. This woman was skipping food, working through exhaustion, and facing humiliation, all while caring for a child in secret, because the system he had built offered her no real choice. The guilt twisted deeper than he expected. He had walked past thousands of cashiers in his career, nodding politely, assuming the paycheck was enough. But now he saw the truth. Sometimes the paycheck wasn't enough to keep the lights on, let alone the dignity intact. When Sophia returned to the floor, she looked even paler, but her smile was back in place. She resumed scanning, greeting customers, moving as if nothing had happened. Liam watched her with a mix of awe and sorrow. Most people would have broken under that weight, but she carried it silently, without complaint. And yet, he knew, silence wasn't strength forever. It was survival. Later in the afternoon, when the rush had passed, Liam found himself beside her station again, holding a fake work order for the scanner. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice pitched so only she could hear. Sophia glanced at him, her eyes tired but steady. "I'm fine," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He hesitated, then said softly, "You don't have to be fine all the time." For a second, her composure cracked. Her lips pressed together, her eyes glistened, and she looked away quickly before anyone else could see. "Thanks, Mike," she whispered, and then she turned back to her register, shoulders straight once again. That evening, as the store closed and workers shuffled out, Liam lingered in the break room. He watched Sophia pack her bag, pulling out a folded blanket, carefully hiding it at the bottom. He saw the way her shoulders slumped when she thought nobody was looking, the way she carried her exhaustion like an extra weight on her back. And for the first time in years, Liam Reeves, billionaire CEO, man of polished boardrooms and strategic reports, felt powerless. But only for a moment. Because then he remembered the promise he had made in the stockroom. He would not just watch, he would act. Tomorrow, he thought, would be different. Tomorrow he would test not just her strength, but his own. Because Sophia Turner wasn't the only one being tested, so was he. Breaking point. The following week at Grand Market number 12 began under a sky that looked tired, heavy with clouds that hadn't yet chosen whether to rain or clear. Inside, the store moved at its usual pace, carts rolling in with squeaky wheels, customers muttering about prices, and workers rushing to keep shelves full. To anyone walking by, it was just another Monday, but to Liam Reeves, hidden still beneath his cover as Mike the maintenance worker, it was a day weighted with dread. He had been watching Sophia for days now, each moment revealing more of her resilience, but also more of her fragility. He could see the strain building in her body, the pale cheeks, the stiff shoulders, the way her eyes sometimes lost focus between customers. She was running on fumes, he knew it. And though her strength had carried her through humiliation and exhaustion before, he feared that something was going to give. That morning, Sophia arrived earlier than usual, her steps slower, her uniform neatly pressed but her shoes showing wear at the soles. She moved like someone carrying invisible stones in her pockets. She greeted her co-workers with the same polite smile, but her voice was softer, thinner, as if even her words had grown weary. Liam noticed, and so did Marlene, the front-end manager, who gave Sophia a worried glance but said nothing, perhaps bound by policies and fears that made kindness dangerous when it slowed down productivity. Only Trent, the operations manager, seemed entirely blind to her condition. He strode across the floor with his clipboard like a soldier patrolling his territory, snapping at anyone who lagged behind schedule, measuring human worth in seconds and compliance. Liam felt a chill every time Trent's eyes passed over Sophia because he knew men like him. They only saw efficiency, not humanity. The morning passed without incident, but around noon, the shift began to crack. Sophia had just finished helping a young mother with 2 toddlers, patiently bagging groceries while the children pulled at her sleeve and the mother fumbled with coupons. The transaction took longer than average, and Trent, who had been lurking near the self-checkout, noticed. He stalked over, his voice loud enough for customers to hear. "You need to move faster, Sophia," he snapped, tapping his watch as if time itself belonged to him. "You're holding up the line." The young mother flushed with embarrassment, mumbling an apology that wasn't hers to give. Sophia, cheeks burning, simply nodded. "Yes, sir," she whispered, and turned to the next customer with steady hands, though Liam could see the tremor in her wrists. It was a small moment, but it pierced Liam like a blade. He clenched his teeth, forcing himself not to break cover yet. He told himself again that his reveal had to be timed, that it had to change not just Sophia's day, but the whole company's future. But the urge to step in and stop the cruelty was almost unbearable. He gripped his clipboard tighter, reminding himself, wait, learn, prepare. The storm would break soon, and he had to be ready. By mid-afternoon, the store was buzzing with customers, the kind of steady flow that never gave anyone a moment to breathe. Sophia kept her pace, scanning, bagging, smiling through fatigue, but Liam could see her strength faltering. Her face had grown pale, her steps slower. At one point, she leaned against the counter for just a second too long, her eyelids fluttering as if sleep had tried to claim her in the middle of the shift. She caught herself quickly, straightening, forcing the smile back onto her face. But Liam saw it, and his heart sank. And then it happened. Near the end of the lunch rush, as the crowd thinned, Sophia's knees buckled. She had been reaching for a roll of receipt paper, her hands trembling with the effort, when suddenly her body gave way. The sound of her collapse was muffled against the linoleum floor, but the sight of it froze everyone nearby. A customer gasped. A coworker dropped a stack of baskets. For one terrible second, silence spread through the store. Liam didn't think. He dropped his disguise of passivity, rushing forward as instinct overtook him. "Sophia," he called out, forgetting to lower his voice to the soft, invisible tone of Mike. He knelt beside her, steadying her head, his voice calm but urgent. "Stay with me. It's okay. Just breathe." Her eyes flickered open, dazed, unfocused. "I'm fine," she whispered hoarsely, the same words she had used so many times before. But Liam could see the truth. She wasn't fine. She was worn down to the last thread, her body finally demanding the rest her willpower had denied it. Trent arrived moments later, his face twisted in irritation more than concern. "What is going on here?" he demanded, as if Sophia had inconvenienced him by collapsing. "If you can't handle the workload—" "Enough!" Liam snapped, his voice sharper than he had ever allowed in this disguise. Trent blinked in surprise, thrown off by the sudden authority in the quiet maintenance worker's tone. Customers watched, employees whispered. Marlene hurried forward, kneeling beside Sophia with genuine concern. "She needs to sit down," Marlene said firmly. "I'll call someone to cover her register." But Sophia, ever determined, tried to push herself up. "No, I'm okay," she insisted, her voice weak but resolute. "I just need a minute. Please, don't make a fuss." Her plea broke Liam's heart. Even on the floor, trembling from exhaustion, she worried more about being a burden than about her own health. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to prove anything right now," he said softly, though his voice carried enough conviction that she stopped trying to rise. She looked at him, confusion flickering in her tired eyes, as if sensing that there was more to Mike than she had realized. The staff guided her to the break room, where she sat with a bottle of water, her hands shaking as she tried to hold it. Liam stood near the doorway, watching, fury burning inside him. He wanted to shout at Trent, to fire him on the spot, to tell Sophia who he really was and promise her she would never have to endure this again. But he knew the reveal had to come when it would matter most, when it would change not just her life, but the lives of every employee like her. So he stayed silent, though his silence was not weakness. It was a coiled spring waiting to strike. Later that evening, when the store had quieted and Sophia had insisted on finishing her shift despite her collapse, Liam caught a glimpse of her wallet as it slipped from her bag onto the counter. He bent to pick it up, intending to hand it back discreetly, but the wallet fell open. Inside, he saw worn photos, a baby with wide eyes and a soft smile, medical bills folded neatly, and an eviction notice dated only 2 weeks away. His chest tightened. The picture was complete now. This wasn't just a tired worker. This was a mother fighting battles on every front, feeding her child, paying rent, covering medical expenses, all while being treated like a replaceable cog in a machine. And Liam knew with absolute clarity that the breaking point had come. Not just for Sophia, but for him too. He could not stand by any longer. Tomorrow, he decided, the mask would come off. Tomorrow the maintenance man would disappear, and the CEO would step forward. And when he did, nothing at Grand Market number 12 or in the entire company would ever be the same again. Small kindness, big change. The morning after Sophia's collapse, Grand Market number 12 moved with its usual hum of carts and chatter, but for Liam Reeves, the day felt charged with an invisible electricity. He arrived early, still dressed as Mike, the quiet maintenance man, but his mind was already set on something larger than disguise. The image of Sophia crumpled on the linoleum floor haunted him. The memory of her trembling hands clutching that eviction notice seared into his thoughts like a brand. And above all, the look in her eyes when she had whispered, "I'm fine," a lie she carried to shield herself from pity, burned with a truth that Liam could no longer ignore. She wasn't fine. She was surviving on the edge of collapse, and if no one stepped in, the edge would swallow her whole. As the staff filtered in for their shifts, Liam noticed Sophia enter quietly, shoulders squared as if daring the world to test her again. Her uniform was pressed, her smile intact, but her steps betrayed a weariness that no amount of willpower could hide. She carried her small bag close to her chest, as always, the hidden symbol of her sacrifice. No one else seemed to notice the depth of her exhaustion, not the customers who breezed past her counter, not Trent, who barked orders about efficiency, not even most of her fellow workers who were too consumed by their own struggles. But Liam noticed, and his heart tightened with every movement she made. He had promised himself that yesterday was the line. The collapse had been her breaking point, and it had been his too. From this day forward, he decided he would no longer simply watch. He would act, not recklessly, not for show, but with precision, kindness, and purpose. He would build small shields around her, protect her where he could, and remind her that she wasn't alone. And slowly, he would prepare the ground for the moment when he would finally step forward as who he truly was. The first opportunity came sooner than expected. Mid-morning, Sophia's register jammed again. the receipt printer coughing and spitting out paper in twisted curls. Normally, she would have struggled alone to fix it while impatient customers tapped their feet. Today, Liam appeared at her side with his toolbox, crouching down before anyone else had a chance to sigh. He fixed the jam in seconds, handed her a fresh roll of paper, and gave her a quiet nod. Sophia looked at him with surprise and gratitude in her tired eyes. "Thank you, Mike," she whispered. "You always seem to show up at the right time." Liam smiled faintly, hiding the ache in his chest. "Just doing my job," he said, though in truth, he knew this was more than a job. It was a calling he hadn't recognized until now. Later, in the break room, Liam made another move. He left a simple brown paper bag on the table, the same way he had before, but this time inside was not just a sandwich. It contained a thermos of hot soup, a piece of fruit, and a handwritten note folded neatly between the napkin. "Strength is not never falling. It's rising every time. For you." He left before Sophia entered, pretending to busy himself with checking light bulbs in the hallway. When he returned minutes later, the bag was gone, and Sophia was sitting at the table, eyes glistening as she carefully folded the note and tucked it into her wallet, as though it were a treasure worth keeping. But kindness, Liam knew, was not only about food or notes. It was also about protection. That afternoon, when Trent began pacing the floor again, his eyes narrowing on Sophia's pace at the register, Liam stepped deliberately into his path. "Ops issue in receiving," he said quickly, holding out a clipboard filled with fabricated notes. "Might need your approval." Trent, eager to exercise authority, followed him, toward the back, away from Sophia. Liam guided him into a pointless discussion about misplaced pallets, stretching the conversation just long enough to give Sophia breathing room. When Trent finally returned to the floor, Sophia had finished her line without incident, and no complaint could be lodged against her. Liam caught her glance from across the store. She didn't know exactly what he had done, but she seemed to sense that somehow the storm had passed her by because of him. Over the next few days, Liam repeated these small interventions, always careful not to reveal his hand too much, always balancing the line between help and discovery. He swapped a broken scanner part before Sophia's shift began, preventing the frustration of dealing with angry customers. He casually wiped down her station during lulls, earning her a rare 2-minute pause to stretch her back. He adjusted her cart of bags so they were always stocked, saving her from being scolded for unpreparedness. They were small gestures, but to Sophia, each one was a lifeline in a sea of endless demands. And to Liam, each one was a reminder that leadership wasn't about titles or suits. It was about noticing the battles no one else saw and choosing to fight them alongside the people carrying them. One evening, after the store closed, Liam found himself walking toward the far corner of the stockroom. He had expected Sophia to already be gone, but instead he found her standing by the shelves of bottled water, cradling her baby in her arms. The child's eyes were closed, cheeks pressed against Sophia's shoulder, tiny breaths soft and even in sleep. Sophia's face in that quiet moment was both exhausted and radiant, as if holding her daughter was both the heaviest burden and the purest joy of her life. She didn't notice Liam at first, but when she did, she startled, pulling the blanket tighter around the baby. I was just leaving," she said quickly, her voice tinged with embarrassment. Liam raised a hand gently, keeping his tone soft. "You don't have to explain," he said. "She's beautiful." Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the kindness. For a moment, her defenses lowered. "Her name is Ava," she said quietly. She's everything." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, the truth of it too raw to hide. Liam's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her then and there who he really was, to promise her that things were going to change, that she would never have to choose between feeding her child and feeding herself again. But he held back. Not yet. He knew the reveal had to come when it would lift her higher, not when it would embarrass her in a moment of vulnerability. So instead he simply nodded and said, "She's lucky to have you." Sophia's eyes shone, and for the first time since he had met her, Liam saw a genuine smile spread across her face, not the polite mask she wore for customers, but a smile born of gratitude and hope. Sometimes, she whispered, I wonder if I'm enough. You are, Liam said firmly, the conviction in his voice startling even himself. You're more than enough. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken truths. Sophia looked at him for a long moment as if trying to understand why this quiet maintenance man cared so deeply, why he always seemed to appear when she needed someone most. She didn't ask, and he didn't explain. Some questions, for now, were better left unanswered. But as he walked away that night, Liam knew the clock was ticking. His small acts of kindness had bought time, but they weren't enough. The eviction notice in her wallet, the medical bills, the exhaustion etched into her face, those weren't problems solved by sandwiches and spare diapers. They were problems solved by power. And he had the power, more than anyone else in that building. The reveal was coming, soon. And when it did, he would not only change Sophia's life, he would change the lives of every worker in every store across his company. For now, though, he kept his disguise. For now, he was still Mike. But each day, with every small act, he was planting seeds of change. And one day, very soon, the harvest of that kindness would shake the walls of Grand Market forever. The reveal. The next morning broke with a cold wind sweeping across the parking lot, rattling the row of empty carts chained together near the entrance. Inside Grand Market number 12, the air felt heavier than usual, as if everyone had arrived already braced for some unspoken tension. The buzz of fluorescent lights and the hum of refrigeration units filled the silence that lay beneath the day-to-day noises. For Liam Reeves, dressed once more in his gray maintenance uniform, the weight was unbearable. He had spent weeks in disguise, watching, listening, learning. He had seen Sophia's sacrifice, her collapse, her whispered doubts, and her fierce strength. He had stepped in quietly where he could, buying her moments of relief with small acts of kindness. But today he felt the fire inside him roaring too loud to be hidden any longer. He had power, and if he continued pretending to be invisible while Sophia faced cruelty, then all his empathy meant nothing. Today, the mask would fall. The day began like countless others. Sophia stood behind her register, hair pulled back neatly, her smile soft but tired. She greeted customers with the same patient warmth, though her eyes carried shadows beneath them. Liam busied himself with a supposed repair in the frozen section, pretending to check temperatures with his old clipboard. But his attention never drifted far from her. He had already decided. He would wait for the right moment, the moment when his reveal would not simply save her from one instance of humiliation, but would expose the truth of her struggles to everyone who needed to see. The moment arrived sooner than he expected. It was early afters, or noon, when a wave of customers poured through the doors, the line at Sophia's register stretching long. She moved as quickly as she could, scanning and bagging, but her hands trembled from fatigue. She fumbled once, dropping a jar, though miraculously it didn't break. A few customers grumbled impatiently, and that was all the invitation Trent needed. Trent appeared at her side like a shadow eager to grow, clipboard in hand, jaw tight with the kind of authority that mistakes fear for respect. "What is going on here?" he demanded loudly, drawing every eye in the front end. "You're dragging, Sophia. Customers are waiting. Do you think this is a charity line?" His words were sharp, cutting through the air with the deliberate cruelty of a man who knew he had the power to embarrass someone and enjoyed wielding it. Sophia flushed crimson, her lips pressing together, her knuckles tightening on the counter. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered under the weight of his scorn. I'm doing my best," she whispered, barely audible. "Your best isn't good enough," Trent snapped, his voice rising. "We can't afford weak links. If you can't handle this job, maybe you don't belong here." The words hung in the air like poison. Customers shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, some glaring at the scene. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and asked why the man was yelling. Sophia stood frozen, humiliated, her body rigid as though bracing against a storm she couldn't stop. And that was when Liam's restraint shattered. He stepped forward, his voice ringing out stronger than it ever had since he donned the disguise. "Enough!" The words silenced the room. Heads turned. Trent froze, surprised that the quiet maintenance worker had dared to speak. Sophia's eyes widened, her confusion clear as she looked at Liam. Trent recovered quickly, sneering. "Excuse me? Did you say something? A mic? Because unless you've suddenly been promoted to manager, your job is fixing shelves, not interrupting me." But Liam did not back down. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, his eyes locked on Trent's. "What I said," he replied evenly, though his voice carried to every corner of the store, "is enough. I've seen the way you speak to her. I've seen the way you treat your staff like they're disposable. And I will not stand here another second while you humiliate one of the hardest working people in this building." A ripple of shock swept through the crowd. Customers whispered. Employees stared. Trent's face turned red with anger. "Who do you think you are?" he barked. And then, finally, the mask fell. Liam straightened, tugged off the gray cap he had worn every day of this disguise, and let his voice carry in its full strength, not the quiet humility of Mike, but the commanding authority of a man used to boardrooms and headlines. "My name," he said clearly, "is Liam Reeves. I am not Mike. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Grand Market." The words crashed into the room like thunder. Gasps filled the air. A cashier dropped a roll of coins. A customer muttered, "You're kidding me." And Trent's mouth fell open, his eyes wide in disbelief. Liam didn't let the silence linger. He turned, his gaze sweeping across the workers, across the customers, and finally settling on Sophia. "I came here undercover," he said, his tone steady but heavy with conviction, "to see how my stores truly run, to see the truth that reports and charts never show. And what I have seen here, what I have seen done to this young woman, is unacceptable." He gestured toward Sophia, who stood frozen, eyes wide, tears glistening, though she hadn't let them fall. "This is one of the strongest, most dedicated employees I have ever witnessed. She works with patience, with dignity, with a kindness that cannot be measured in seconds or transaction times, and she has been treated with disrespect." Trent sputtered, his words tumbling over each other. I didn't know. You can't just... This is how we enforce standards." "No," Liam cut him off sharply. "This is how you break people, and I will not allow it any longer." His voice thundered with finality. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties. Leave your badge in the office and walk out." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Trent's face drained of color. He stammered protests, but the authority in Liam's voice left no room for argument. He stormed toward the office, muttering under his breath, but everyone knew. His reign of cruelty was over. Then Liam turned back to Sophia. For a long moment, their eyes met. She looked at him as though she had never truly seen him before, her expression a mix of shock, confusion, and something softer, relief. "You," she whispered, unable to form the words. "I'm sorry," Liam said, his voice quieter now but still strong enough for her to hear over the whispers. "I should have revealed myself sooner. But know this, Sophia, you are not invisible. I see you. I see the sacrifices you've made, the strength you carry, and the injustice you've endured. And starting today, everything changes." Sophia's lips trembled, her hands tightening on the counter. For the first time in weeks, her composure cracked, not from shame, but from the overwhelming release of knowing she wasn't alone anymore. A tear slipped down her cheek and she quickly brushed it away, whispering, "Thank you." Liam nodded firmly. "No," he said, "thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like." The room buzzed with awe, the story spreading in whispers faster than it could be contained. Customers stared, employees exchanged wide-eyed glances, and Sophia stood at the center of it all, the quiet cashier who had unknowingly brought an undercover CEO to his knees, not with protest, not with anger, but with her cue, wit, relentless courage. And as Liam stood there, the weight of his title heavy on his shoulders but finally wielded with purpose, he knew this was only the beginning. The reveal was done, but the work was just beginning. Tomorrow, the policies would change. Tomorrow, the programs would be built. But today, in this single moment, something greater had already shifted. The culture of Grand Market had changed because one man had finally seen one woman's struggle and chosen not to turn away. Transformation. The following morning dawned brighter than anyone expected. The storm of the day before had left behind a quiet stillness, the kind of silence that follows a moment of truth too large to be ignored. Word of what had happened at Grand Market Number 12 had already spread beyond the walls of the store. Employees whispered, managers called each other in disbelief, and even customers who had witnessed the scene carried it home as a story worth retelling. The tale of a disguised maintenance man revealed as the CEO, and of a single cashier's courage and sacrifice bringing change, was traveling faster than any corporate memo ever could. Liam Reeves arrived at the store early, not as Mike the maintenance worker, but as himself. For the first time in weeks, he wore a crisp navy suit, his shoes polished, his tie perfectly knotted. Yet despite the sharpness of his attire, there was no trace of arrogance in his steps. He walked with a steady, grounded purpose, the kind that came from knowing he had finally aligned his power with his conscience. Staff members froze as he entered, their conversations halting mid-sentence. Some stared, others bowed their heads slightly, unsure how to greet a man they now realized had been walking among them all along. Liam smiled gently, easing their tension. "Good morning," he said simply, his voice warm but firm. "Let's get to work." He gathered the employees in the break room, the same cramped space with flickering lights and mismatched chairs that had been their refuge during rushed breaks. But this morning, it felt like a council chamber. Every seat was filled and some employees leaned against the walls, waiting, expectant. Sophia sat quietly in the corner, her hair tied back neatly, her small bag tucked at her feet. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as though uncertain what the day might bring. Liam's eyes met hers briefly, and he gave her a small nod, a silent assurance that she was not alone. He began without pretense. "I came here in disguise," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Not for publicity, not for cameras, but because I wanted to see the truth. Reports and charts don't show me how this company really runs. You do. You, the cashiers, the stockers, the clerks, the managers on the floor, you are the heartbeat of Grand Market, and what I saw here opened my eyes." He paused, letting the words settle. "I saw dedication. I saw sacrifice. I saw strength that no spreadsheet could measure, and I also saw injustice. I saw people treated as if they were disposable, when in truth they are the very reason this company stands at all. That ends today." The room was silent, but the silence vibrated with emotion. Some employees blinked back tears, others exchanged glances, hope dawning in their eyes. Liam continued, his tone firmer now. "From this day forward, several changes are being made. First, childcare. No parent should ever have to choose between earning a paycheck and caring for their child. Grand Market will immediately begin funding an employee childcare program, partnering with local centers and covering costs where needed. Second, scheduling. Predictable hours will be the rule, not the exception. No more last-minute cuts, no more chaos that leaves families scrambling. Third, respect. Every manager in this company will be retrained to understand that leadership is service, not domination. Anyone who humiliates or belittles an employee will have no place in this company." His eyes scanned the room, the message clear. Marlene, the front-end manager who had always shown quiet kindness, nodded with tears in her eyes. Diego from receiving let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief but smiling wide. And Sophia, sweet, exhausted Sophia, sat frozen, her lips parted, her eyes shimmering as though she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then Liam looked directly at her. "And finally," he said, his voice softer but carrying weight, "we will recognize those who remind us what true strength looks like. Sophia Turner, please stand." Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia's eyes widened and she shook her head quickly, trying to disappear into her chair. But Liam's gaze remained steady, gentle, encouraging. Slowly, hesitantly, she rose to her feet, clutching the edge of the chair for support. "This woman," Liam said, gesturing toward her, "has shown more resilience, more dedication, and more grace than I have ever witnessed. She has sacrificed her own comfort, even her own meals, to care for her child while serving this company with dignity. She is exactly the kind of person who deserves to be lifted up, not torn down. And so, starting today, Sophia will not be standing behind a register unless she chooses to. She will be promoted to a supervisory role with higher pay, better hours, and the support she needs to provide for her family. This is not charity. It is justice long overdue. For a moment, the room was silent, and then it erupted into applause. Genuine, thunderous, overwhelming applause. Some employees cheered, others wiped tears, but all of them clapped as if they had just witnessed not only a promotion, but a promise fulfilled. Sophia stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks now, unable to stop them. She covered her mouth with one hand, her shoulders trembling with the force of her emotions. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, when the applause finally cue. "Ted." Liam stepped closer, his eyes kind. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just keep being who you already are. That's more than enough." Sophia nodded, her tears falling freely now, but her smile, the real smile that had been hidden for so long, lit up the room. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was seen, she was valued, she was honored. And in her transformation, every worker in that room felt a spark of hope ignite within themselves too. Over the following weeks, the changes Liam promised began to take root. Childcare partnerships were established with funds dedicated to ensuring no parent had to hide their baby in a stockroom again. Scheduling software was overhauled to give employees predictable hours and stable incomes. Managers were retrained or replaced if they refused to adapt to the culture of respect. And slowly but surely, the atmosphere at Grand Market began to shift. Smiles became genuine, not forced. Breaks were real, not stolen moments. Employees carried themselves taller, prouder, knowing they were no longer invisible. Sophia thrived in her new role. With her increased pay, she secured a safer apartment, furnished with a crib by the window where little Ava could watch the world outside. She enrolled in evening classes, determined to build an even brighter future for her daughter. At the store, she guided her coworkers with the same patience she had once given customers, mentoring new hires, reminding them that their worth was not defined by the speed of their scanner, but by the dignity they carried. And through it all, Liam remained present. He visited often, not as a distant CEO issuing directives, but as a leader who walked the aisles, shook hands, and listened. He had rediscovered something in Sophia's struggle, a truth he had almost forgotten. Leadership was not about numbers or profit margins. It was about people. It was about noticing the quiet sacrifices that kept the company alive and honoring them with respect, support, and justice. Months later, when Ava turned 1, Sophia invited Liam to a small celebration at her new apartment. The party was modest, homemade cake, paper decorations, a handful of co-workers who had become friends, but the air was filled with laughter and warmth. As Liam held the smiling baby in his arms, he felt something shift deep inside him. This wasn't just a company he was leading anymore. It was a community, a family, and it was stronger because of one young mother who had refused to give up. When he left that evening, Sophia walked him to the door. "You changed my life," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Liam shook his head gently. "No, Sophia, you changed mine." And as he stepped out into the night, the city lights shining above, he knew the story of Grand Market would never be the same. Because in one hidden stockroom behind stacks of bottled water and boxes of paper towels, he had discovered the truth. The greatest power a leader can wield is not authority, but compassion. And with that truth, he would build not just a better company, but a better world.